It was a perfect summer evening in Sydney, the kind that feels full of promise and simple joy. On February 1st, 2020, a group of 7 young cousins were walking together in the suburb of Oatlands. They were on a happy mission, heading to a local shop to buy some ice cream, a small treat to cap off a beautiful day. The air was warm, filled with their laughter and chatter. Among them were the Abdallah siblings, Anthony, who was 13, Angelina, who was 12, and Sienna, who was just 8 years old. With them was their beloved cousin, Sakr, who was 11. These 4 children were at the heart of their families, bright lights with futures that seemed to stretch out endlessly before them, full of potential and dreams waiting to be realized. This ordinary scene of childhood innocence was about to be torn apart in the most unimaginable way. The simple act of walking to the shops, something done by children all over the world every single day, would become the setting for a national tragedy. The love and close bond shared between these cousins was palpable. They were more than family. They were the best of friends, navigating the adventures of growing up side by side. Their parents, Danny and Abdallah, had built a life centered around their children, cherishing every moment. In an instant, the very foundation of their world, and the world of the Sakr family, would be violently and irrevocably broken by an event that no one could have ever foreseen. The street they walked along, Bettington Road, was familiar and felt safe. It was their neighbourhood, a place where kids should be able to walk without fear. But on this particular evening, danger was fast approaching, unseen and unexpected. The joy of the moment, the simple pleasure of an ice cream run with cousins, was suspended in time, a final, beautiful memory before the chaos descended. The story of this evening would become a story of immense loss, of a pain so deep it seems impossible to bear. It would also, remarkably, become a story about the power of the human spirit to find a path forward, even from the darkest of places. The loss of Anthony, Angelina, Sienna and Veronique sent a shockwave of grief through their community and across the entire country. 4 young lives, so full of energy and love, were extinguished in a single, horrific moment. They were not just names in a news report. They were a son, a brother, 2 daughters, 2 sisters, and a cherished cousin. They were students, friends, and the center of their family's universe. The profound emptiness left by their absence is a wound that will never fully heal. Their story forces us all to confront the fragility of life and the devastating consequences that can arise from a single person's reckless actions on a seemingly ordinary day. The 7 children were walking together on the footpath, just a short distance from their destination. They were likely talking about what flavors of ice cream they would choose, their minds occupied with the simple delights of being young. Suddenly, without warning, a blue utility truck, often called a ute in Australia, came hurtling towards them. The vehicle was completely out of control. It mounted the curb at high speed, its path directly intersecting with the group of innocent cousins. The sound of the impact was brutal and final, a horrifying noise that shattered the peace of the suburban evening and signaled a tragedy of incomprehensible scale. The scene that followed was one of absolute devastation and chaos. In that terrifying instant, the lives of Anthony, Angelina, Sienna, and Veronique were tragically cut short. They were killed almost instantly by the force of the collision, their summer evening walk ending in the most brutal way imaginable. The 3 other children in the group were also struck and suffered serious injuries. One of them, an 11-year-old boy, was thrown a significant distance and was left in a critical condition. He would later spend 2 long months in a coma, fighting for his life. The physical and emotional scars from that moment would be permanent, a constant reminder of the friends and cousins he lost, and the future that was stolen from them all in a flash. The immediate aftermath was a scene of sheer panic and heartbreak. First responders, neighbours, and frantic parents rushed to the site, confronted by a sight that would haunt them forever. The ute had finally come to a stop, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The simple joy of an ice cream run had turned into a nightmare from which there was no waking up. The focus was on trying to help the injured and comprehend the scale of the loss. For the parents, Danny and Abdallah, and for Veronique's family, the world had stopped turning. Their beautiful children were gone, and the silence that replaced their laughter was deafening and absolute. This was not just a car accident. It was a violent intrusion into the safest of spaces, a neighborhood footpath on a Saturday evening. It highlighted the vulnerability of pedestrians, especially children, to the reckless behavior of drivers. The tragedy served as a stark and painful reminder that the vehicles we operate have the potential to become weapons when handled irresponsibly. The community was left reeling, struggling to understand how such a senseless act could happen in their own backyard. The loss of 4 young lives in such a sudden and violent manner created a wound in the heart of the community that would take a very long time to even begin to heal. The driver of the ute was a 29-year-old man named Samuel William Davidson. The investigation into the crash quickly revealed that this was not a simple accident caused by a moment of distraction. It was the direct result of a series of deeply irresponsible and dangerous choices he had made throughout the day. On that Saturday, Davidson had spent hours drinking with his friends. When he got behind the wheel of his vehicle, his blood alcohol concentration was more than 3 times the legal limit. This level of intoxication severely impairs judgment, coordination, and reaction time, making it incredibly dangerous to operate any machinery, let alone a powerful truck on a public road. The situation was made even worse by the fact that alcohol was not the only substance impairing his ability to drive. Toxicology reports confirmed that Davidson also had drugs in his system, including cocaine and MDMA. The combination of high levels of alcohol with these illicit substances created a potent and deadly cocktail, further diminishing his capacity to make rational decisions or control his vehicle safely. He was, by any measure, in no condition to be driving. His decision to get behind the wheel was not just a mistake. It was a profoundly reckless act that showed a complete disregard for the safety and lives of every other person on the road or footpath. Witnesses reported seeing Davidson's ute being driven erratically in the moments leading up to the crash. He was speeding, and he ran a red light just before he lost control of the truck. As he turned onto Bettington Road, the combination of his speed and his intoxicated state made it impossible for him to navigate the bend. The vehicle swerved, mounted the curb, and ploughed directly into the group of children. Davidson later told authorities that the events were blurry, but he never denied that he was the one responsible. He made the choice to drink, he made the choice to take drugs, and he made the catastrophic choice to drive. These choices set in motion the chain of events that led directly to the deaths of 4 innocent children and the serious injury of 3 others. The tragedy was not an unavoidable act of fate. It was the predictable outcome of a person knowingly engaging in extremely high-risk behavior. Davidson's actions that day serve as a harrowing example of how personal choices can have devastating and far-reaching consequences. The heartbreak and suffering he caused were the direct result of his decision to prioritize his own reckless pursuit of a good time over the fundamental responsibility of ensuring the safety of others in the community. It was a failure of judgment on a catastrophic scale. Following the crash, Samuel William Davidson was arrested and faced the full force of the legal system. The case against him was overwhelming, given the clear evidence of his intoxication and reckless driving. He was charged with multiple serious offences, including 4 counts of manslaughter for the deaths of Anthony, Angelina, Sienna, and Veronique. Understanding the indefensible nature of his actions, Davidson pleaded guilty to all charges. This spared the families the additional trauma of having to endure a long and painful trial, a small mercy in the midst of their profound grief. The legal process then moved to the sentencing phase, where the court had to decide on a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crimes. In April 2021, the judge handed down a severe sentence. Davidson was sentenced to a total of 28 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 21 years. This meant he would have to serve at least 21 years before he could even be considered for release. In delivering the sentence, the judge described Davidson's actions as a horrific and grossly irresponsible abandonment of his responsibilities as a driver. The sentence was intended to serve as a powerful deterrent to others who might consider driving under the influence, sending a clear message about the catastrophic consequences and the serious legal punishment that would follow. However, the legal journey did not end there. Davidson's lawyers decided to appeal the sentence, arguing that it was excessively harsh. The case went to the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal. In 2022, the appeal court judges agreed to reduce the sentence. They determined that the original sentence did not adequately account for certain legal principles, including Davidson's early guilty plea. His total prison term was reduced to 20 years, with a new non-parole period of 15 years. While still a very significant amount of time, this reduction was difficult for some to accept, as it lessened the time the person responsible for such immense loss would spend behind bars. The legal saga concluded when prosecutors attempted to have the original, longer sentence reinstated by taking the case to Australia's highest court, the High Court. However, the High Court refused to hear the appeal, which meant that the reduced sentence of 20 years with a 15-year non-parole period was the final and binding punishment. For Samuel Davidson, this meant his earliest possible release date would be in 2035. The complexities of the legal system, with its appeals and revisions, can often seem disconnected from the raw human emotion of the tragedy, but in the end, it delivered a substantial, life-altering punishment for the man whose choices had destroyed so many lives. For Samuel Davidson, now in his mid-30s, life is a stark and disciplined contrast to the reckless freedom he once knew. He is serving his sentence at Cessnock Correctional Centre, a medium-security prison. His days are structured and monotonous, a world away from the one he inhabited before the crash. He is locked in his cell for up to 17 hours a day, from around 3:15 in the afternoon until the next morning. This long period of isolation provides ample time for reflection, a forced confrontation with the magnitude of his actions and the irreversible damage he has caused. The reality of his choices is now measured in the slow, relentless passing of time within the confines of prison walls. During the limited hours he is out of his cell, Davidson has been assigned a job within the prison system. He works as a lawnmower operator, tending to the grounds of the correctional facility. This work provides a small measure of purpose and a break from the isolation of his cell, but it is a humble and repetitive task. When he first entered the prison system, he was placed in protective custody for his own safety, a common measure for inmates involved in high-profile cases that have caused public outrage. The man who once lived a life of social gatherings and impulsive decisions now lives a life defined by routine, control, and the constant presence of guards and fences. One of his greatest sources of anxiety is the thought of his parents. They are his most steadfast supporters, making the long drive to visit him most weekends. These visits are a lifeline, a connection to the world outside and to the family he still has. However, he is consumed by the fear that his parents, who are getting older, may not be alive to see him released from prison. This worry adds another layer of suffering to his sentence, a personal consequence that underscores the long years stretching before him. He is acutely aware that his actions have not only destroyed the Abdallah and Sakr families, but have also brought immense and lasting pain to his own. In the quiet solitude of his cell, Davidson has been forced to confront the man he was and the man he has become. He has expressed profound remorse for what he did, stating publicly, "I hate that it happened, and I hate that I'm responsible for it." He acknowledges his fault without excuse. This remorse is not just a performance for the authorities, it appears to be a deep internal reckoning. The daily reality of prison, the loss of freedom, the separation from loved ones, and the endless time to think, has become the harsh crucible in which he must live with the consequences of that one terrible, unforgivable evening. In mid-2024, something truly extraordinary took place. Through a program run by Corrective Services NSW called Restorative Justice, a meeting was arranged between Samuel Davidson and Danny Abdallah, the father of Anthony, Angelina, and Sienna. The purpose of restorative justice is to help heal the harm caused by crime by bringing offenders and victims together in a safe and controlled environment. It allows victims to ask questions and express their pain directly to the person who caused it, and it gives offenders the chance to understand the human impact of their actions and offer a direct apology. For both men, this meeting was a monumental step into the unknown. The encounter took place within the secure walls of the prison. When Danny Abdallah walked into the room and saw the man who had taken 3 of his children from him, the tension was immense. What followed was a moment that defied all expectations and captured the attention of the nation. Instead of anger or recrimination, Danny opened his arms. He embraced Samuel Davidson, the man responsible for his deepest pain. In that embrace, years of anger, grief, and bitterness seemed to momentarily dissolve, replaced by an incredible act of human connection. It was a powerful, visually stunning symbol of grace in the face of unimaginable suffering. During their conversation, which was documented for a television special, Danny spoke to Davidson not as a monster, but as a broken human being. He called him brother and prayed with him. Davidson, in turn, was able to apologize face to face, to express the remorse that had been building inside him for years. He listened as Danny described the beautiful children he had lost, the vibrant personalities, the hopes and dreams that were extinguished. For Davidson, this was not an abstract news story anymore. It was a direct confrontation with the father of the children whose lives he had ended, a man who was offering him grace instead of hatred. This meeting was a pivotal moment in the story of this tragedy. It shifted the narrative from one of just crime and punishment to one of forgiveness and the possibility of healing. For Danny Abdallah, it was a way to release the burden of hate and to honor his children's memory through love. For Samuel Davidson, it was a profound and life-altering experience. The direct, unconditional forgiveness from the person he had wronged the most provided him with a new path forward. Not one that erases the past, but one that allows for the possibility of change and redemption. The meeting showed that even in the darkest of circumstances, dialogue and empathy can open the door to something new. The forgiveness offered by Danny Abdallah and his wife Layla is perhaps the most remarkable part of this entire story. From the very beginning, just days after losing their 3 children, the couple publicly stated that they forgave Samuel Davidson. This was not a decision that came after years of healing. It was an immediate response, rooted deeply in their Maronite Catholic faith. They believed that holding on to hatred and bitterness would only destroy them further, and that forgiveness was the only way to keep the spirit of their children alive in their hearts. It was an act of spiritual survival, a choice to respond to devastating darkness with radical love. Danny's forgiveness is not about excusing what Davidson did. He has never downplayed the horror of the crime or the immense pain it caused. Instead, his forgiveness is about releasing himself from the prison of anger. He explained his perspective by saying that true justice would be having his children back, and since that is impossible, no prison sentence, whether it's 1 year or 100 years, can truly fix what was broken. Forgiveness, for him, is a gift he gives to himself and his family, allowing them to live without being consumed by a desire for revenge. It is a conscious decision to choose peace over perpetual torment. This act of grace was powerfully demonstrated during his meeting with Davidson in prison. By embracing him and praying with him, Danny was living out the core tenets of his faith. He showed that he saw Davidson not just as the perpetrator of a terrible crime, but as a fellow human being who had made a catastrophic mistake and was also suffering. Danny even went so far as to say he would support Davidson's eventual application for early release, believing that keeping him locked up for longer would not bring his children back or heal his own heart. This perspective is challenging for many to understand, as it runs counter to the natural human impulse for retribution. Danny and Layla Abdallah's capacity for forgiveness has been a source of inspiration for people all over the world. It shows that there is another way to respond to tragedy, a path that does not lead to a dead end of anger and despair. Their example demonstrates that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but an act of incredible strength. It is the power to look at the person who has caused you the most pain and choose love instead of hate. It is an astonishing testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the profound power of faith to guide people through the darkest valleys of life. In the wake of their devastating loss, the Abdallah family made a conscious decision to channel their grief into positive change. They were determined that the deaths of Anthony, Angelina, Sienna, and Veronique would not be in vain. They wanted to create a lasting legacy for their children, one that would protect other families from suffering the same unbearable pain. This commitment led them to become powerful advocates for road safety, campaigning tirelessly for stronger laws to hold intoxicated drivers accountable for their actions. Their advocacy was focused, passionate, and deeply personal, driven by the memory of their four angels. Their primary goal was the creation of new legislation, which they named the Four Angels Law. This proposed law aimed to close loopholes in the existing legal system and introduce much tougher penalties for drivers who kill people while being under the combined influence of alcohol and drugs. The Abdallahs argued that the current laws did not adequately reflect the extreme recklessness of such behavior. They believed that someone who makes the decision to drive with multiple intoxicating substances in their system should face consequences that are closer to murder than to a standard charge of dangerous driving. Their campaign gained significant public support and media attention. Danny and Layla met with politicians, shared their story in countless interviews, and rallied the community behind their cause. Their message was clear and powerful. If the laws are tougher, and potential offenders know they will face a very long time in prison, it will serve as a much stronger deterrent. They were not driven by revenge against one man, but by a desire to change the entire system to prevent future tragedies. Their grief gave them a powerful voice, and people listened because their plea was born from the most authentic and heartbreaking of experiences. The family's efforts have had a real impact, prompting serious discussions among lawmakers about reforming sentencing laws for vehicular manslaughter. While the full scope of the Four Angels Law is still being debated and implemented, their advocacy has already raised immense awareness about the dangers of drink and drug driving. The Abdallah and Sakr families have transformed their personal tragedy into a public mission for the greater good. They honor their children not just by remembering them, but by actively working to build a safer world where no other parent has to receive the same horrific news they did on that summer evening in 2020. For Samuel Davidson, the forgiveness offered by the Abdallah family has become a powerful catalyst for personal change. Inspired by their faith and incredible grace, he has embarked on his own spiritual journey while in prison. He has turned to Christianity, the same faith that guided the Abdallahs in their ability to forgive him. He now prays the rosary every day and regularly attends Mass within the correctional facility. He has expressed a desire to formally convert and become a Maronite Catholic, seeking solace and structure in the religious tradition of the family he so grievously harmed. This turn to faith is a central part of his effort to become a better person. Davidson has also tried to understand the root causes of his own destructive behavior. He has spoken about past trauma in his life, including the death of his sister, which he says contributed to a long-term problem with alcohol abuse. While this in no way excuses his actions on the day of the crash, it provides some context for the pattern of poor choices that led to the tragedy. Acknowledging these underlying issues is a critical first step in any genuine process of rehabilitation. His journey is now focused on confronting these personal demons and learning to live in a way that honors the lives that were lost because of his past behavior. The connection between Davidson and the Abdallah family has continued beyond that single meeting in prison. In an amazing demonstration of their ongoing commitment to forgiveness, the family has maintained contact. When Danny and Layla welcomed a new baby daughter in April 2024, they received a phone call from Cessnock Correctional Centre. It was Samuel Davidson, calling to congratulate them on the birth of their new child. This small but significant act shows that the bridge built during the restorative justice meeting was not just a one-time event, but the beginning of a complex and ongoing relationship based on grace and the hope for redemption. The story of Samuel Davidson and the Oatlands tragedy is ultimately a powerful narrative of hope emerging from the depths of sadness. It shows that even after a horrific and senseless loss, forgiveness is possible. It demonstrates that a person who has made the worst imaginable mistake can still choose a path toward remorse, change, and redemption. The future for Davidson is long and uncertain, but the path he is now on, guided by the astonishing forgiveness of the Abdallah family, offers a profound lesson. It teaches us that while we can never change the past, we can change ourselves, and that even in the face of the deepest sorrow, the human spirit can find a way toward healing and a better future.